Hi, my name is Jeff H. Sipe of PracticeInterviews.com, where we offer practice interviews, negotiation strategy, and we have a course coming out really soon. So, how to crush any interview. There's so much guidance and advice out there that says do this or do that, but they don't actually walk you through the steps. And what we're going to do today is we are really going to simplify. We are going to break apart how to answer a behavioral question and how to answer an open-ended question and really focus on that answer component in smaller sections. What are a few simplistic ways that you can practice and prep to have fantastic success? If you follow any one of these steps, you're going to get better in your overall answers. I promise it. I guarantee it. Hang out with me. The first three items are going to be focused on behavioral. The second three items focused on open-ended, and then the last item we'll focus on a little bit is transitions. If you like my content, please like. If you have any comments, please comment below. And if you like my overall content, please subscribe. Item 1, situation and task, 30 to 40 seconds. The long situation in your interview examples, it's a singular point of failure. Way too much context. So what's the strategy? What are we going to do here? We're actually going to take our top 5 examples and we're going to write down just the situation and task only. That's it. And then I want you to pull up that Google stopwatch and time yourself. And what you'll likely find is that your situations are really long, that it's really, really hard to get it down to 30 or 40 seconds. So what are the core items to focus on? Simplistically, we're just going to talk about your role in your company and any context if needed. We're going to talk about that process, relationship, strategy, technology. We're going to identify and introduce that. And then we're going to talk about that one task, the multiple tasks, those items that we needed to cover to actually solve for it. And just going through this simple exercise will get you off to such a good start, and you'll create that repetition and say, oh, whoa, I was adding all that additional context, all that additional information, but break it away. Break away your situation from your examples and just focus on this part to start. If you stop watching the video now, this guidance will absolutely help you with your answers. So really, really focus in on short situation and break them away from the rest of your answer. Item 2 is actions. And more when I've been working with clients, I've really kind of recognized and noticed the power of the high level. So what does this mean? I specifically want you to focus on one concept and one concept only. What did I do? So take those top 5 examples, and before you really do anything, before you get into the weeds of writing everything down, just ask yourself, what are the major 3, 4, or 5 items that I did in this example? How did I personally contribute? Now, of course, contributing is in collaboration with others almost always, but start to think through items such as, what did I research? Who did I chat with? What are some of those initial items and steps I took? How did we test my hypothesis? How did we test things? And then ultimately, how did we launch, present, and have that great finality? So this will be amazing because breaking down your answers will get you away from storytelling. And remember, past performance predicts future performance. I need to know what you did. So if we go really high level and we just ask ourselves what we did, then we can break it into smaller pieces and take that secondary step of writing out the supporting actions of that major action. And the supporting actions are all about the how and the what you did. Okay, so taking this simplistic step is going to be critical, because if you go back to the beginning and think, hey, what did I really accomplish in these actions? It's a great way to break it down and really get connected to the answer and really get away from the storytelling component. Item 3, results and learnings. So this is a really interesting one because actually when you write down these 5 examples, of course, I want you to focus on that major result. So if there's some really good numbers tied to it, for example, or a really great relationship win, of course I want you to write that down. But what I really want you to focus on is the repeatable leverage item, because that's an item that's constantly missed and not talked about, and that is actually repeatable for any behavioral answer. So even if it's a conflict question, a strategy question, a technology question, at the end, We can talk about those additional results. So it becomes a very easy way to prep and for you to walk through and tell me like the major impact of this, because I'm not going to hire you just because you have great results one time. I love the repeatable stuff. So top 5 examples, just write down this process was repeatable, or we won 3 additional relationships because of the relationship I built with Jane. Whatever it might be, it's a really simplistic step. And why is this important? Because with our results, it becomes the end of our answer. And at the end of our answer, we want to really finish strong. Okay, if we bring in that learning component, the biggest thing with learnings is I want you to find that one major item that you learned during this example, during this process, this program, etc. High level and succinct. Find one, and if it's a thought outside the box or something simplistic like that, you may want to ask yourself, hey, does this learning make sense in this specific case? Okay, let's flip the coin and let's go to clarifying questions. And this was tougher. I wanted to figure out how do we naturally go about this? How am I going to help you with this? And because we naturally are going to break out our open-ended answers and we're going to compartmentalize them a little bit when we prep. But if we start with clarifying questions, one way to really simplify this process is just to start with one. What is one question you're always asking when you step into a strategy meeting or a process meeting or a technology meeting or a collaborative meeting or whatever it might be? Just start with one question and then build on it and work on it. So let's throw out this example. So new versus existing is my favorite question. But that actual phrasing doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it's new versus existing. Sometimes it's, well, what stage is it? Beginning, middle, or end? Sometimes it might have to do with the length of the relationship. So is it brand new? We've met a few times. We've known each other for over a year. And feel the flow, right? Start saying these clarifying questions out loud, but just get that one down. Because if you have one great go-to question, it will just make when you hear these questions and getting into the flow easier. And then I want you to repeat this process. Get 2 or 3 go-to questions. That's it. Don't do anything else before you think, what are the major themes? Oftentimes new versus existing, who are the stakeholders, what's the industry, for example. It might be about a journey, like a technology journey, a process journey, etc. These are just some items to think about. But if we just get down 2 or 3, right when we get into these clarifying questions, in the open-ended question, it's going to really help your flow, and then you'll create some nuanced questions just based on the question, but one question at a time. It's really going to help. Okay, item 5, frameworks. Yes, we will continue to discuss frameworks because they're incredibly powerful for staying organized and keeping you on point. And one of the ways I started to think about, okay, how can we make this really easy? So I just want to start with the frameworks. Write down 2 lists. Write down just 4, 5, 6, 7 of your key strengths, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 concepts, ideas, things that you think you're going to need to accomplish in this role. And that will be the beginning of your foundational framework. You're probably just going to take 3 of those concepts and say, okay, this is what's needed and this is a real strength of mine, right? So a strength might be collaboration, and then one of the items you might need to be looking at is scope and scale. And then obviously you know that stakeholders are a big part of the job. Those could be your 3, right? And are we going to play around with that? Absolutely. But if you start at the beginning of creating really simplistic frameworks, and then as you go in and you start practicing questions, you'll say, oh, every time I do this, I think about risk. Okay, risk becomes our 4th item. But creating these 10, 12, 15 word frameworks, I think that's why it gets a little overwhelming. So let's start really small, and then we'll do the additive piece later. But if we break it down in this way, just looking at our strengths and what the job is looking for, it's going to create those simplistic items and concepts that we can really build into our solutions, and it will absolutely keep us more organized. Item 6, solutions. Okay, this is the trickiest and the most fun. So stick with me. How do we break solutions into smaller pieces, especially when we don't know what the question's going to be? It starts with learning a little bit more about the organization and the product. And then what you're going to start to think about is, okay, knowing the organization, knowing the product space, and kind of understanding the job, here are some likely scenarios that I will face in that position. Then the second piece you want to think about is, this will correlate back to your career. What are some creative solutions that you've problem solved for in your career? Then what are you going to do? You're going to take that third item, which is putting it all together and creating something really simplistic. So what does this all mean? High level contextual. Let's say you're going in for a client facing role for Google Cloud. And so what you would want to be thinking about is, how do you interact and engage with clients currently? What are some unique strategies you've maybe taken to build and foster relationships? And then how could you correlate and couple that with GCP technology? So you can literally be ideating and thinking through these solutions, but just do it one at a time. Do one that's really client facing, do one that's really technology facing, do one that's very strategy and process focused. We can pre-plan our solutions, but just going through and breaking it down into these smaller sections, it's going to be incredibly valuable because it will trigger your brain once you get into the interview to say, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. These are the steps I need to take to really have success in these answers. Think really small, think one solution at a time. Item 7, transition statements. Okay, this is awesome. So now we've broken our answers into smaller pieces. Now we're going to start going back and saying our whole answer out loud, but what's the missing component? The missing component is transitions. And actually, when we break it down into really small pieces, it will help make our transitions more powerful. So what does that sound like? Let's take moving from the situation and task into the actions, for example. A transition statement would be something like, and the first action I took, the first thing we did, the first item I researched. It will really teach you to move from one section to the next. So there's a clear delineation between the setup, what you did, and the results, for example. Now, on the open-ended side, let's go and talk about maybe frameworks going into the solution. So you might want to say something like, I think we should focus on risk, but is there one area that you want me to focus on? So why are we talking about this and why are transitions so important? It's so important because we can get all the data, we can break it all down into smaller pieces, but then breaking it down and understanding how to say that one or two transition statement or statements, it's going to really help the flow and keep you continuing on the pace and keep them engaged and interacted in the process. And transition statements are definitely more important on the open-ended side. I know that this is a lot. As always, I'm kind of trying to throw a lot at you in these videos, but the reality is if we can break things into smaller pieces, it is going to be critical for our success. So think about doing one thing at a time and then putting it all together. If you went through these 6 steps and then built in that 7th transition step, guaranteed better answers. It will take time, but it will make you better, I promise. I really hope this helps. Thanks.